Welcome. You're listening to Guiding Stars and the Jeffrey Wolfe Green School of Evolutionary Astrology. I'm here with Stacie Pazura. This is Kristin Fontana. We are your hosts, and we are here with a team of exceptional EA astrologers to discuss the archetype of Cancer, the fourth house, and the moon, and how this archetype is expressed naturally. I'd like to welcome Stacie back to Guiding Stars. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm always here.
You always enjoy being here. Here's our exceptional team. We've got Sol, Helena, Deva, Ari, and Tara. We are so excited to discuss this archetype of Cancer, and we will introduce them individually as we invite them into the hour, but we're going to share a few thoughts before we get going and dialoguing and having these wonderful speakers share a little bit about each of the archetypes. We are looking at Cancer through the different planets. Cancer as an archetype in the different planets. For example, Jupiter in Cancer, Uranus in Cancer. All of the planets are in a sign when you were born. And obviously we look at the Pluto paradigm very closely by house and sign in evolutionary astrology, but we all know our sun signs, our rising signs, and our moons. But this is an opportunity to take a deeper look at all of these other planetary positions, the houses, the signs, and really get into some deeper layers of what that means in your journey. And also just a greater understanding of the planets themselves, independent of some of the mainstream the sun, moon, ascendant, and of course the Pluto paradigm that we always start with in evolutionary astrology. And we learned with Gemini and Mercury in the third house that souls have experienced the evolutionary necessity to project themselves out into the world in order to collect information, facts, and data. Therefore, there is a great emphasis on the mind and the intellect. But at some point in the evolution, the soul realizes there's a limit to what the mind can access. And it is within Cancer, fourth house, and the moon where we are shown that the soul can only evolve through the emotional body. Cancer, fourth house, and the moon is yin. It's a return back to the center. And this archetype has our soul feeling everything. If you have planets in Cancer, fourth house planets, you know what I'm talking about, especially a fourth house Pluto. And Cancer is a cardinal archetype, and like its counterparts, Aries, Libra, and Capricorn, it demonstrates that an evolutionary cycle is closing and that a new cycle is underway. So we're moving into the first turn here today. Souls with a strong Cancer fourth house signature are desiring to learn the evolutionary lesson of security rather than attempting to access emotional security from outside itself. And because this evolutionary lesson is new, the soul can still feel to be emotionally wet behind the ears. And this can lead to the feeling of being repeatedly thrown back on yourself to establish more self-reliance, emotional self-reliance. And this occurs for the soul to learn how to cultivate its own sense of emotional security without the need for external feedback. For example, about 80% of fourth house Pluto individuals have had a series of prior life experiences in which their emotional needs have not been adequately met by one or both parents. It's not uncommon for these individuals to have a difficult karma or prior life association with one or both parents. And this leads to the experience of unresolved karma. One thing I wanted to share here is just to ask the question, and I'll get to this slide, is what happens when we repress what's natural? Jeffrey used to say, whatever we repress becomes distorted. And I want to give you the visual of a beach ball when you're in a swimming pool or out in some body of water. I know I grew up surrounded by water a great deal, and I used to always love to jump on that ball and try and submerge that ball underwater. I want you to imagine that that beach ball is a ball of emotion that you've been holding on to or suppressing. And at some point in time, the more we repress or suppress what is natural, that ball will shoot out, hit someone in the face, create some kind of cataclysm perhaps. But whatever we do repress emotionally over time really can wear on us, creates a gravity, like through the polarity looking at Capricorn. And so obviously repressing emotion is not natural, but very common in this patriarchal time that we're living in. That fear of being vulnerable can be so prevalent. We witness it in our relationships, and there's nothing more attractive, I feel, than when someone can just walk as they are in the world, and that they can just not be weak, but be vulnerable, be open. There's a real strength that lies within someone's ability to just show the world who they are. And that's the power of Cancer, I feel. It's so tender, and with that crab, that shell, there's very little that typically we want to be showing the world. It can be a very shy archetype, naturally shy. So the moon rules the third eye with the sun, and the fourth house Cancer moon archetype all correlates to the Jungian psychological dynamic called anima and animus. The anima-animus dynamic correlates to the basic fact that all people are intrinsically male and female. So really the ultimate goal is to actualize both sides of gender, no matter what gender you were born into. For example, a man being able to be vulnerable and openly express his emotions. You know, the opposite of what this patriarchy has been, you know, saying a man needs to do in this context. And the opposite would be a woman just going after it, full throttle, you know, going after her dreams, you know, fueling that independence, you know, accessing that drive, that confidence, following her instinct. So just to embody both sides of gender, the sun and the moon at the third eye. Now, one of the things I love most about this archetype, and I have to say it's probably one of my most favorite archetypes to talk about, it is because it's the first of the three water signs in this water trinity. And as I mentioned earlier, we can only evolve through the emotional body. We can, you know, there's really truly a limit to how far you can go intellectualizing things. At some point, you just got to give in. You got to get naked. You got to strip down the clothes and get into the water, get into the river. Getting naked, when I say that, I mean that metaphorically, literally at times, to be, you know, in a space with somebody, and, you know, naked honesty would be a great word for this. But I love the Cancer archetype because, you know, we as humans feel what it means to be human every minute of every day through the moon. We feel the ups and downs with the ebbs and flows of our life. And it's just part and parcel to being a soul having this human experience. And so when we think about Cancer, we think of getting into the river. The river is a body of water that will follow the path of least resistance. It doesn't fight the tide, it surrenders. And so when we surrender to our emotions and to what we want to say, need to say, and access that freedom to say what we want to say, then it can literally be like a river, or the emotional body, like finding its way back to the sea. The soul within this river, following this current. And the sea is represented through Pisces and the 12th house, the soul, Scorpio, in the 8th house. The sea also represents that wholeness, that holiness that everybody is wanting to experience, that feeling of unconditional love that can only be accessed within ourselves. It's not something that we access outside of ourselves or in our relationships. And that's the beauty of Cancer, that natural archetype, to cultivate those inner waters, to really become strong in yourself, empowered in who you are, to embody the yin and the yang, the male, the female, both sides of that gender, and to feel whole into yourself as a result. You will feel vulnerable, but you're learning how to find strength in that stride. And really, ultimate strength is a powerful thing to behold when all of your emotions are balanced through the square to Libra, that other archetype that we'll be talking about in the future. So I want to take this time to bring Stacie back on, because I feel like she has a wonderful story to talk about. What a beautiful example to have as a parent that really supported her nature? And I'll let you describe this slide.
Yeah, this is a picture of me and my dad and my best friend. I'm the one in yellow. But I mean, just before I describe my dad, I am a fourth house Pluto. So these parental lessons are very key to my own evolution. I feel like I'm in a lifetime of reward because I was given two parents with two very different focuses. I had a mother, or have a mother, who is just the embodiment of unconditional love. She just nurtured me so deeply that it really enforced what I already had in my soul. And my dad, he's more of a quiet guy. He's a man of few words, but he's very alert. He pays attention to people. He really likes to, he values the individuality of people. And as his daughter, I've never fit into the mold. I have the Damon soul archetype, and I just sort of manifested in my own unique little way. And part of me was a big tomboy. I wanted to play baseball and get in the dirt and catch lizards, and and on the other hand, I'd play with Barbies sometimes. And so this picture is, well, I guess before I get to that, my dad would take me camping, and this was our way of bonding. We wouldn't have emotional talks, really, but he would take me out on drives, and we would have little contests of trying to spot animals on the mountainside or in a field, and all of that. And it just became one of the most joyous things to share with him. He just really taught me the wonder of nature and the wonder of wildlife. And here in this picture, he's taken me camping, and I brought my Barbies along, and you can see him holding a Ken doll, and he's not making a silly face. He's just like,
Yeah.
That's the kind of dad he was. He really appreciated me for all of my individuality, all of my quirks, but he especially nurtured that part in my Damon soul that really needed to connect with nature. And that helped me growing up, in situations of socialization where I just didn't fit in at all. And by showing me like how to develop relationships with animals and encouraging me. He bought me a parrot when I was 10 years old. And, I trained that thing to fly to me across. This was a wild-caught bird, which is unfortunate, and I'm glad they don't do that anymore. But this bird did adapt very well, and we had a very strong bond, and I taught him all kinds of tricks. And one day he got out and flew away and flew to the top of a tree, blocks away. And together with my dad, we coaxed the bird down, and I brought him home safely, which was really incredible. So I really have a lot of gratitude for my dad. He's so special to me. He has nurtured my individuality so much. He would take pictures of me as a child when I wasn't aware of the camera, just to capture the things that I was doing and my interests. And it's really given me the strength as an adult to just own that. And I just can't thank him enough. And it kind of leads me to think of, with this coronavirus right now, because I worry about him. He's in a vulnerable category, and right now, there are people who die or they're hospitalized, and they can't have their family members come in. They literally reach the point of death, and they can't have their family around them. And it's all part of the fourth house lessons, but it's a difficult one. I don't know, Kristin, what are your thoughts?
I love, I love your fourth house Pluto here coming out, because sometimes it just takes a memory to unlock the gates. One memory, one picture. I know your father took this picture as well.
Yeah.
And just even the old picture, it just can bring it all back, and all the emotion that you feel. And I don't know about you guys, all you all listening, there's nothing like a good cry, you know, where you're just bawling your eyes out. And just, it's really important to keep the emotion going and flowing when you're feeling it, to not hold it in, hold it back. And we are living in very challenging times, especially as it relates to feeling connection and feeling like we can connect to the people we really care about. It's so bizarre, you know, to be walking around with masks and standing 10 feet from each other and shouting, hey, yo, you know, it's just not natural, actually, at all. And so I love the fact, too, that you were able to share your story as a fourth house Pluto soul, where you had this mother who loved you so unconditionally, and this father who really just allowed you to be who you were. That is rare. As I mentioned, 80% of the fourth house Pluto souls, you know, usually have one or both parents that are not giving them what they need emotionally. So this is an exception to the rule.
Yeah. Also, these pictures that we're viewing were taken by my dad at a place near Lake in the Uinta Mountains. So he just has an incredible eye for nature.
So beautiful. Of course, a Damon soul, you know, would call in a father like that to bring you back out there again and help you remember what you've been missing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, here people dying without the presence of their families. This is a real thing. I mean, I can barely watch the news when I see some of this. It's a lot. And I think what the Cancer archetype learns through that trinity is that it doesn't matter. You can tune into that soul. You can connect through the ethers. You can feel their presence psychically, spiritually. It's forcing you to actually go deeper, go higher, look further, stay more receptive, to really learn how to communicate in a new way. I mean, it's forcing people to really evolve on this level, to work on our other senses and, you know, our other inner workings, so we can feel connected to the ones that we love. And if people are listening and they've lost loved ones in this way, you know, my heart really goes out to you. It's but the question always comes down to this, is like, why did I need to create this for myself? What is the lesson that I need to learn? And of course, Stacie, you're learning. You did have these wonderfully supportive parents, but in your lifetime, that fourth house Pluto, through many turns of your own, are learning how to self-provide in every way.
Yeah.
We can't live with our parents forever, right? You know, so.
Well, and one of the ways that manifested is that both of my parents had careers. And so, you know, I came home from school and I spent most of the day by myself. And so it really did enforce those lessons of self-reliance.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's great that you had both of that, so you could learn those lessons too, because really that soul this is a key word, is desiring that need to become self-reliant, because they know they need that to evolve.
Yeah.
And I feel like this chart is such a perfect example too of the fact that just because you are at a heightened or a higher state, evolutionarily speaking, and as Yogananda, he still had to experience some real emotional hits. We aren't free from them as we evolve. They can get harder, for sure. We can't have attachments. I say we, I mean, the soul cannot have attachments as it evolves deeper into the spiritual state. And he was incredibly close to his mother. And it is one of the stories in the Autobiography of a Yogi that I cry every time I read it, because I had that same sort of attachment and connection to my mother, who's no longer here. And I remember too, at my very first reading, an astrologer saying to me, "Oh, you have a Cancer rising. You must not have a very good relationship with your mother." I said, "How rare." You know, I have the most amazing relationship with my mother. She's the most nurturing being on the planet, like angel on earth. And so we have to look at the whole chart, and it's not always going to be, you know, cut and dry, just because of that Cancer presence. And so anyway, when looking at this chart, what we see here, while we are not seeing any planets in the sign of Cancer, he does have Venus and Mercury conjunct in Sagittarius in the fourth house. Venus rules his north node in Taurus, which of course reflects that self-reliance, that yogi symbol there too, and along with the Pluto, Neptune up in the 10th. But what happened was he lost his mother unexpectedly at a very young age. In fact, she had left to try and, I think she was helping prepare a wedding for his brother. And one of the family members was really sick, and she got sick overnight and died. And he couldn't even say goodbye to her. And he was just what's the word?
Oh gosh.
You know the word I'm saying.
Yeah.
You could not, he was inconsolable.
Yes.
Thank you. I want to say irreconcilable. That is not it. Inconsolable. He was inconsolable. And so he refused to leave the attic where he, went and just mourned the loss of his mother, who he just was so close to. And I don't want to go too far into the story. Everyone who hasn't read that book and read that chapter should read it about his mother. But what he learns in this experience at a very young age, and I want to say 10, somewhere around there, young, was that he realized that he had to lose his earthly mother in order to access the heavenly mother. Now think about that water trine. The earthly mother is symbolized by the 4th house, the moon, of course. The heavenly mother we can see more with the 12th house and Neptune. And so he knew that he would never be able to evolve to the heights that he needed to help others in the way that he wanted to until he could access the heavenly mother. So it was incredibly painful, of course, even at his stage of evolution. And he talked about the fact that he was looking for those black eyes all over the planet, for the remainder of his days, really looking for her. And what the heavenly mother told him is that, these eyes that you're looking for, you will find in my eyes, the heavenly mother. Uranus on the south node. The nodes are lunar symbols, is the sudden loss, sudden death that he experienced that really propelled him into his journey at a very young age. Mm-hmm. So chills everywhere. See, that's what happens when I think about Cancer stories, or I think about the mother on any level. And so I am a mother too, so it makes it even more, I just love this archetype. There's so much there for us to really work with. And this is where we evolve, right here. And it's not easy, it hurts. It hurts a lot when we're really living in that lane. So, all right, we are gonna get going with our wonderful speakers though. And I'll let you introduce our first one. Stacie.
Okay, well, we're going to hear from Sol Jonassen first. She's going to give us a few thoughts on Pluto and Mars. So welcome, Sol.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here. Especially Cancer is one of my favorite archetypes. I say that about all the archetypes, but it is true, I do. I can't pick a favorite, and every time I get in deep with one of the archetypes, I'm thinking this one is probably my favorite. But Cancer is in particular a favorite of mine, perhaps thanks to my daughter, who's a triple Cancer nonetheless. So I really got to learn a lot from her because I have absolutely no Cancer planets in my charts. I do, however, have the moon on the south node, so that probably gives it a little bit of depth. But my daughter learned me, she taught me a lot about the Cancer tempo and the rhythm of Cancer. Cancer is a very rhythmic sign. It's these biorhythms. And being, I've been a yogi for practicing yoga for a long time, and it's exactly what we are learning in yoga. It's to listen to the body and listen in on each and every day. It's not a very, if we want to use this word, patriarchal way of living, because then you have a goal and you just do it, and there's a lot of force and there's a lot of Capricorn energy kicking in. But the Cancer rhythm is softer. It is definitely tuned into each moment. And in each moment, there is a wisdom, there is a gift. That's why they call it the presence. Isn't that a thing that people say now? The now is a presence. It's the present. And when you tune in and listen, because listening is part of the Cancer archetype, being able to listen. That's why Cancer people thrive when people are available around them. that they're not looking into the phone or constantly absent in their minds, which was part of the Pluto in the 4th house archetype that I will cover a little bit. Both my children are coincidentally Pluto in the 4th house. And I was privileged enough to be home with them for a very long time, thanks to the nature of my work. I get to sit a lot in front of the computer and do readings, and I can do that in between all my chores in the house. So they pretty much grew up with a mother who was always there in a way. Of course, I wasn't always available. You know, my head tends to be in other dimensions, being an Aquarian. But that's exactly what my daughter has shown me. You know, you have to be there, you have to be present, you have to pay attention. And if my rhythm, which can be very, very high because I'm very airy in my nature, I'm like, I did it yesterday. That's the level of my tempo. So that's not compatible with her tempo at all. So I have to chill down in order to reach her where she is. And it's been such an amazing journey for me to have that experience because of my lack of Cancer planets, to be quite honest, because she really showed me how to be even more, even better at listening to my own feelings and emotions when they arise and create the space that is needed in order for that release to happen, so that I don't, as many people probably experience during their life, freeze up, so that I don't close up. You mentioned it was a yin quality, and yin's qualities, in Tantra, we call it the river. That's the female energy. So sometimes the river is flowing very strongly, and other times it's almost dry, you know, it's like, and then of course, sometimes it's actually covered with ice. So you could have that encapsulation of the emotions when it comes to Cancer as well, like freezing up, which is a very unhealthy expression of it, which is like a very fearful expression. A typically traumatized expression of the Cancer archetype would be somebody who's cold as ice, which is odd when you think about the emotions being the connective tissue between people. And it is there we can feel and sense the quality of our souls. We can taste life in a way through it, for better and worse. Sometimes it tastes less pleasant. And that's why in Cancer, we become subjective about our lives. We become personal about our feelings. It's like, I like this, but I don't like that. You know, it's highly subjective. It is part of the subjective area of the zodiac, where you are starting to really feel in, what is it that works for me? Now, of course, today we see a very Capricornian thing happening with our work life, and we are generally not given the luxury of feeling in. And there's this brilliant quote by Erin Sullivan in her Saturn book, actually. She starts out with saying, well, it's in the first pages, I'm not sure where it is, but she starts out with saying Saturn is, civilization demands, I'm not sure if she uses the word suppression, but it demands suppression, that each individual suppresses certain aspects of their emotional life so that we can work in a civil way with each other, which is a very valid point. But when it gets to the point where this suppression becomes a habit and it destroys our relationship, we lose the opportunity of this oxytocin, this connective hormone that I associate with Cancer. You know, Cancer is that moment when you are birthed out of the water. You come out of the water of the womb. And ideally, you should be put directly onto the breast of your mother so that you can just stay there before the umbilical cord is cut, and you can just stay there and have that connection. And what do you learn? I mean, the phases that is just after birth, what is the child learning? It's learning to regulate and to have a nervous system. It's learning to regulate all these experiences that it is living in a body. It's very embodied. And Cancer is extremely embodied in their own self when it's working and functioning properly, of course. But the moment there's fear, and we all notice this, especially women, when we come to Mars in Cancer, and we're going to talk a little bit about the sexuality, how easy is it not to just go into control mode because you're not feeling safe? And then what do you miss out of? All the fun, of course, all the juice, all the ecstasy, all the good stuff of sexuality, because the body is not opening up and is not breathing. It is not letting go, and it's not showing up in their emotions. I've spoken to a lot of women when it comes to sexuality, and a lot of them, once they go through this feeling of opening up, they start to cry once they reach a certain level of ecstasy in their own sexual experience. That's like they get in touch with their feelings again. So of course, with this very important stages just after birth, if there's a connection to the mother, if there's a connection to that other person, and it's done at the pace that it's supposed to happen, then this Cancer archetype will develop very harmoniously, and you won't get this dependency problem that sometimes shows up with Cancer, or the control problem that sometimes shows up with Cancer. Like you have to know everything. What happens next? What is, I don't want to go out of the house because I'm not sure if I'm ready yet. You know, like this like, I don't like nothing that I don't know about. And you're like, I don't like the unknown. The unknown is terrible if there's like a lack of inner security. And I love the example you said with Yogananda, because yes, it is true. Eventually the soul will reach that point where there's less external dependencies. Actually, the entire dependency problem is gone. You will learn how to regulate yourself. Now, my daughter was one of the people I saw that, you know, like I paid attention to this fourth house Pluto, and I knew I would have to be available a lot for her, in particular for her, but both of them actually. And I remember in particular, there was this phase when she was between 3 and 5, where she had a lot of feelings coming up, like anxieties and fears, and like, she had trouble regulating herself, and you can sort of see that her nervous system was like hyperactive at that point. Like she couldn't calm herself down. This is like she became kind of like she was taken by the river. She was just going by the flow here, and it's this. And what I did then, I could not talk to her and say, hey, come on, it will work out. Everything will be, you know, it's this regular, that can feel very suppressive in a way. That's the Saturnian way of educating people. It's like, well, trying to be rational about it, and, you know, trying to give them some solutions. And that just feels like pushing. So there's this thing we need to understand when Pluto is in the 4th house, or there's a strong Cancer archetype involved, that there's no possibility that if you push something, they will just go into an even deeper state of emotion and even just withdraw. Eventually they will reject, yes, they will reject the parent who are not able to understand. They will go, you don't understand me, and there's no words to explain this. It's just pure emotion. So you can have a rejection, like an isolation happening, in particular with Mars in Cancer, because it's so defensive. It has a lot of defensive mechanism happening. But once you just sit with this Pluto in the 4th house person, and you just, you know, you could have that little child on your lap, or you can just be there and just go, I'm here, you know, like you're available, and there's no pushing, then the magic happens. And then there's this beautiful timing, because there is a polarity point to the Pluto in the 4th house. And of course, it's our beloved Capricorn. So eventually there's like, yeah, sure, don't have all day, but have to find the right time to sort of like carefully push you, because Capricorn is tough love. It's also a very caring sign, we have to remember. I feel it's getting a little bit of bad rep these days, but it's important to find this balance between regulation and allowing. You know, there's like this, if you just have like worst case scenario, Cancer, you know, gone wild, could be somebody who's getting down on the floor in the grocery store and going, I'm not leaving this store until I get my ice cream, and just going, tantrum. And that's not happening in my house. We don't have that kind of time, and it's not healthy for the child even, like this, sometimes you read that about the Pluto in the fourth house, or the Pluto to the moon or something, incredible intense emotions, and the parents just freak out. I don't know how to handle this kid, but if you just pay attention, because I think that's probably the most important thing, with Cancer, is just pay attention. Where are you right now? What is it that you really need? I always ask myself, what is it that she really, really needs? Because, I might be programmed and conditioned, Saturn, Capricorn, into thinking what good parenting might look like. But if I go into the biology of everything and I just try to tune into the energy, something else appears. And that always worked very well. Both my kids, I of course, we love our children, but they feel to me to be extremely emotionally secure in themselves. That's the kind of grounding, I must say personally, I didn't have. I had to work for it as I grew up older, but maybe that's why my focus was there when I got them. Like, that would be a success for me, if I can, if they feel emotionally safe in themselves. Now, that would be the goal for a Pluto in the fourth house, to be emotionally safe in themselves without repressing feelings, but not overindulging in them either, right? Not manipulating through feelings, or not. It's like this middle path. So for me, that's kind of like the evolutionary journey of that archetype, to reach that level of emotional independence, and also be able to safely and securely, in due time, whenever you feel ready, without being pressured. The worst thing you can do to Cancer is to push them. It works like you get, what, this is not working, and then you get like, oh, I remember my child, she was like taking off all her clothes. I wanted to get her to kindergarten, and then
I did that too.
It's like, she just, like, it's just easy things like leaving one room for another. Like, oh my God, there's a change happening. I don't want to leave this room. I'm having such a great time in this room. Why do I have to go out of this room and into another room? So it's about changes, learning how to go with the flow and learning how to change. Now, everybody has to kind of like find that balance for themselves. So yeah, it's a fascinating archetype, and it's really learning the incredible importance of detail. Like, emotions are what they are. We can't really negotiate with them, right? We can regulate them, but that doesn't mean suppressing them. It actually means expressing them. So finding how to do that in a trusted environment, and with trusted people, and with people who are not always invading you with their thoughts and ideas of how that should look, is a very healthy way to that's the healing of Cancer, in my opinion. Now, Mars in Cancer is also a family favorite, if I have a few minutes left to go through that one. Actually, it's been quite a curiosity for me why I have so many family members with Mars in Cancer, also my mother, to be quite honest. And we talked a little bit about sexuality, because here comes the sexuality bit in as well. Like, it's an amazing sexual position actually for Mars. But it requires, again, this inner need for security. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier as well. Where do you open up? Because there's no point in having sex if you don't open up to the ecstasy. You have to breathe through your belly and get everything to move through your body. And it goes for men as well, and maybe, Jeffrey actually mentions this oral obsession with Mars in Cancer, like everything, like breasts and bellies, and like just a lot of, getting close and touching and feeling, and just getting to the feeling level of everything. And so it's an amazingly passionate sexual placement for Mars. Air and water and fire. Ooh, it gets together. It's hot. But it can be very clingy, and it can be very stingy with the sex as well, and use sex as some sort of subtle control here, because of this emotional insecurity that is lying underneath. But once it opens up, I mean, yeah, I can first-handedly say that it's pretty nice, to be quite honest. amazing lovers, to be quite honest. So yeah, but absolutely, a very a sexuality that doesn't work until there's been some oxytocin happening, you know, some connection between the bodies. Like we need to, and I don't know how long you have to hold you know, hug or hold hands, or, you know, to get that kind of resonance between people. But I think it's around, you know, like 2 or 3 minutes, and then you're starting to feel. And it should always be something that is included in, especially women, because you know, the feminine energy is extremely sensitive to anything that feels too quick, or abusive, or something that is invasive. You know, it's not taking the time to, it's, you know, the whole sexuality of a woman is water. This is like, in Tantra, we say we got to bring the water to a boil in the woman. Yeah? She has to be heated up. And every woman who has, you know, contact with her body knows that, you know, the fluids of the body are extremely important for the sexual well-being of the woman. So she has to be, you know, juicing up a little bit on her own passion, to be quite honest. And that's the water quality. It's just like this getting into your body. You have to feel yourself in a way. And I think if, you know, through breathing or just getting in touch with your breasts and your belly and everything, and that would be extremely important for Mars in Cancer, to be quite honest, because security becomes such a vital factor. So if you or anybody listening out there who has a Mars in Cancer right now, you know, and you struggle with not being able to open up because of this control and, you know, the emotional insecurity, I don't know what he feels about me or what she feels about me, and, you know, it becomes some sort of weapon that is being used in a relationship, then, you know, having an opportunity to work with a safe partner and learning how to breathe and learning how to connect first, you know, and then
emotionally.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful, you know, like, so Jeffrey says that it's a placement that's, you know, once it works, it's for emotional and spiritual and psychic renewal. And that's the bonus of healthy sex.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That was great. So love that. Yay. I could just listen to you all day, I have to say. That was really good. I really love that segment. And I've been doing this work for 20 years, and I have to say, I learned a lot of new words today. Connected to Cancer, oxytocin. I mean, that is just perfect. I gotta say.
Right.
So thank you for that. And another thing too is about spooning is a big one after sex, right? Spooning is just so important for the Cancer archetype, to feel safe, right? To just bring all that energy from that experience and just bring it into the womb of the connection. It's like you're in a bubble, right? That's what is needed.
Cancer is related to the Watsu therapy. Have you seen this Watsu therapy where you are in a pool that is, it's heated to your body temperature and somebody's holding your head?
Wow.
You're just floating in this pool. We can also relate it to salt water tanks, right? But you are like somebody, I saw this Watsu in Hawaii, and it was just beautiful experience to watch. You know, the therapists were sort of underneath the cranium of the person and just holding, so that the person was just lying still in this pool, and they were doing these slight movements, just very, very subtle movements, so that there will be some release of the nervous system and the tensions, and then this opening up the feelings again.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah, that's back to the womb therapy. So I really like it. And
that's perfect Cancer therapy. Yeah.
Perfect Cancer therapy. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Stace, any thoughts on that little bit?
Yeah. I mean, it's so important to what you said, Sol, about, you know, not focusing on the pushing and all, you know, this kind of treatment to help someone just naturally come to their inner security, because the essence of Cancer is change. It's cardinal, it's water. We evolved through the emotional body, and the root of evolution is change. So that inner security is just so important, and you really reminded me of that.
Yeah, another thing she said too, or Sol, you said being present, that presence. And I too, both my children and myself, we're all 3 Cancer risings. and they just are emotionally present, and you know, they're always just right there. And it's true. I mean, I've got a lot of air as well, air and fire in my charts. So even though I've got that Cancer rising, it's like this out picturing that you can see within your family. All souls will call in what they need to evolve, right? And so they remind me, they're like little mirrors for me. Slow down, Mom, you know, and, you know, be present. It's right here. This is all there is in this moment. And that tenderness of Cancer is just so beautiful. I just love it. So anyway, I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So our next wonderful guest is Helena Garcia.
Hello.
Helena. We don't have a picture of her, but we have her voice. Speak to us.
Okay, so I thought about not only speaking about Neptune and Venus, which is what I'm here to speak of today, but I would also want to touch on how we can speak of a recovery of the natural Cancer archetype through, of course, Lilith's South Node in Cancer, and also the Vesta asteroid as the keeper of the moon goddess mysteries. And to first introduce this archetype, I had this story yesterday that I think I should share, in which I was walking with these friends in the night, and we were the only one in the street, and at some point we saw this little kitten that was trying to jump through a wall and then goes to go into this backyard. And at some point he tried, he saw us, and we noticed that he was scared of us. And we stopped, but he kept going. And we at some point decided, well, we have to go back. Let's see what he's doing, because he's going to, if he continues, he's going to this street where it has a lot of cars. And it was then a really, really funny moment happened, beautiful, that the mother appeared at the top of the hall that he was trying to jump into. The mother quickly looked at us and then ran away halfway to the little kitten. So she quickly noticed that we were not there to do her harm or to do the kitten harm. And then she let the little one come to her, and she stayed there while we went back. And it was really, I think that the mother was really the essence, the kitten and the mother was really the essence of the journey we go through the Cancer archetype, right? And this is also interesting for me, because this week I was arriving to this conclusion that emotional security as its foundation in a state of harmlessness, in a way that to try to be harmless to oneself and one another can be a true act of self-mastery and emotional maturity, which is exactly what we've been damaging through this patriarchal journey. And through that, I would propose this idea that this natural archetype is essentially one that we need to recover and remember something, more so as it relates to the feminine directly, Cancer. And with that, last week we had spoken about Gemini and Mercury, and I think Upasika and Deva related that to Cancer. And I also agree that there is, with Cancer, and to fully understand Cancer, we have to make aware, to be aware of this transition between Gemini and Cancer. Because Cancer stands on the notion of cycles and phases, which from the point of view of Cancer, Gemini being the last sign before it, gives it a balsamic quality of allowing new thought forms to emerge as the beginning of a new identity or self-image. So by this intrinsic relationship of the moon and cycle, we should have present, we cannot fully understand the moon without understanding the past, as well as understanding the Pluto, given Pluto's North Node, our collective future for our souls, is in fact in Cancer. Which brings me to propose, and this core idea, that Lilith's South Node in Cancer holds an essential key to this future, at the same time to the past, going back to the past. And with that, I will share with you an exchange I had with Kristin the other week, in which I was talking, we were preparing this panel, and I was talking about my chart and the fact that I have natal moon conjunct asteroid Lilith, and both are squaring the nodal axis. And and Kristin sent to me an image with a thought, and she said, "I think you'll like this." And the thought said something like, "She remembered who she was, and the game changed." And this is in fact true for everyone that is recovering some essential part of themselves. And for me, and relative to this transition from Gemini, what I think is really interesting in this sentence is the fact that remembering is giving it a name. And I think giving it a name is essential so that we can, from there, start to make new self-images, new identities. So if for me this name was Lilith, these big themes that we have like racism, gender, privilege, these Capricorn Cancer themes that we're discussing right now as a society, can only progress to a new identity and self-image when we are able to name it and make it conscious. So doing that, we see at the same time the distortion and its natural state. The name touches on some sort of collective memory and inner knowing of a distant past, and which is also a natural expression of Neptune and the collective consciousness, and at the same time unveils the distortions that are somehow this unspoken agreement to keep things going on as usual, which correlates to the distortions of Neptune coming to the surface and our current north node of the moon in Gemini being squared by Neptune itself. So in this way, I think that the asteroid Lilith south node in Cancer is the direct inner knowing of the Great Mother. Women that have this south node in Cancer, they have this inner knowing in their own root. If with Lilith south node in Taurus, we became aware of being one with the earth and its fertility, and with Gemini, we preserved and bridged the feminine roots, inner wisdom throughout the changing times, Cancer South Node Lilith will guide us to return to our essential armlessness, which is all about mothering and caring for ourselves the best we can, and for others too. This wisdom can guide us to care for our emotions. And for me, expressions like safe space or boundary only exist when we ignore our emotional needs according to some repressing system, the distorted Capricorn, and we feel the need to protect their expression at some point, creating what we call a boundary or a safe space. Because naturally, emotions would be emotions. We can have the need to retreat, feel our emotions beyond our space, but if we have difficulties integrating the Capricorn polarity point, is exactly when we go outside for experience, counsel, or listen to the wisdom of the elders and the wise, to then take responsibility for our own maturity. With Capricorn not being the boogeyman, but actually an exercise of openness in the Cancer experience, a positive growing experience. A great example of this is, of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which has the South Node Lilith in Cancer, conjunct natal Jupiter, and the amazing source of wisdom and she is to most people who truly listen to her. And by doing that, remember their natural selves and open the possibility to act in the utmost respect for that. And that brings me to another proposal, which is that we also look at the asteroid Vesta that is traditionally attributed to Scorpio and to Virgo because of the ritualistic and devotional practices, to also be seen for something that it is, which is the archetype of the ancient priestess with a special relationship with the moon's mysteries. Vesta women were married to the sacredness inside their selves. So in its origin, before the Vestal Virgins of Rome, the Mitra George says the essence of Vesta always points to the center, to the inner home I would have. And that is very Cancerian. The natural wisdom was one of coming from the Great Mother Goddess worshipped in the form of the moon to the preservation and care for the sacred flame inside of one's home or self. the moon would have been the first guide to inform humans on the structure of time. And in the case of women and women's menstrual cycles, gave them an inner knowing that they too belonged in this matrix of the mother, that the sacredness of the inner fire naturally related to the essence and sacredness of the sexuality whose duty would be to preserve, tend, and care for. So synchronistically, today as we speak, asteroid Vesta is in Cancer, conjunct the north node of Pluto. And it's interesting to reflect on these subjects and that could mean for the future. And a great example of this, with both Vesta and South Node Lilith in the soul of a man, is the example of Bob Hunter, which was the founder of Greenpeace movement, with the campaign raising awareness to the need to protect the whales. He had Vesta conjunct Sun in Libra, South Node of Lilith, conjunct natal Moon, and North Node Pluto in Cancer. So think of whales with all of these symbols. Last, speaking of Neptune and Venus in Cancer in the 4th house, we have a deep soul desire to mature our relationship both with spirits, ourselves, and others through the process of going through our emotions. Given the balsamic nature of Neptune, this relationship unveils the mysteries of the dark moon goddess with much wisdom and much coming into culmination in the self-image of the soul, with a strong message not to fear, but welcome any necessary dissolution. To not be afraid of any dark moment, because the simplest truth is that the new cycle is just coming, the new phase is just coming. And with Neptune in the 4th house, cyclical retreats onto itself, cycles of letting go, are a natural way to feel at home, to listen to the divine within, and the right answers to move forward are coming from there. This is where the soul can come home. And also with Venus, the lessons of self-reliance coming from Taurus and Venus side of how we relate and nurture ourselves in the natural sex side to Cancer are the positive emotional state we can show balance in our relationships. Putting our art out there with no expectations or reserve is how we can show ourselves we are enough and no matter what. So that would be my thoughts.
Thank you, Helena. That was amazing. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you know, your chicken story really kind of opened something up for me, as well as just talking about the intrinsic boundaries and safe spaces. And it brings my thoughts to this current event that we have going on in Portland, Oregon, where we have these intense protests, and most of them, you know, most people peaceful, and these unmarked, unidentifiable militant type people coming in and trying to shut the protests down, and just exhibiting a lot of abuse. And we had this phenomena happen called the Wall of Moms.
Oh yes, I saw it today.
Yeah, and here these mothers come out, and there were dads included, but they joined arms, and it was almost as if, you know, they were keeping their children in a safe space, because and you know, encouraging them to pursue something that is bigger to themselves, and, you know, taking the tear gas and taking the hits, and it's just it's an inspiring demonstration of that Cancerian quality of a mama bear. And
yeah, and now that you mention it, it's funny because there is a wall of mothers and a wall of veterans, so it's Cancer Capricorn walls.
Right, that's great. Yeah. Right. That's perfect.
All right. Thank you so much, Helena. That was just wonderful. I loved it all. Love all the, I have Lilith and Vesta both in Cancer as well. So.
Yes, we discovered that we have the same degree.
Right.
Exactly.
Tuning in closely to those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Stace, go ahead and bring in our next speaker.
Okay, so next we're going to be hearing from Deva Green. She's going to be sharing some ideas about the sun and the moon. So welcome, Deva.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back. So the thoughts I wanted to share about the Cancer archetype and its natural expression is also that it's a recovery of our original self-image or our original root as created by the source itself, looking at that water trine from Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. There's a metamorphosis of the egocentric structure as we progressively shift what you guys have all been sharing, which has really touched my Cancer moon in a very deep way, is the shift from external security to internal security, the route home, the pathway home. What's somebody else going to do for us anyway, right?
Right.
Little Sag lightness on that one. But at the core of it, in many different ways, we're finding our way back to ourself via this shift from external to internal. And in the process of doing that, we're recovering our original self-image as created by Source. And in so doing, we're shedding these artificial or reflections of our past, or reflections of maybe our insecure or not so mature side. But we're rediscovering who we are, and that's also the part, it's square from Libra to Aries. It's not out of insecurity I will then go ahead and live through or play into the expectations of others, or feed into the insecurity of others so that I feel secure. That's one of the parts of Cancer that I've had the most difficulties dealing with, and that I've really been kind of probing into, because normally, or the way it's typically presented is being emotionally needy. And I've known some people, especially with moon and Cancers, who actually find security through, it's almost the opposite. It's that they attract those who appear to be more needy than themselves as a way to affect their own security. So it can be this way of nurturing somebody else in order to feel secure or to feel that they're needed. That's the more Libra side. But then we have the square to Aries, which is really that breaking out of the womb and feeling self-secure, or rediscovering one's identity outside of that paradigm, outside of the, I'm either meeting your expectations or fulfilling your needs, or you're fulfilling mine, and the pathway home. So in its natural expression via the water trinity, it's that realignment with our original self-image and the original or the natural expression of the mother or the feminine, as both Helena and Sol were speaking of, that how many of us are trained, especially as women, to think of as nurturing as something that's truly so opposite of that. True nurturing, this is my point of view, really comes from helping that person as much as you can, and yourselves, to shift that center of emotional security from the outside to the inside. It very much to me feels like a little child being coaxed to grow up at times. Come on, you're secure, you can do it. You don't need anybody else. You got this. You're home. You're at home in yourself, nothing else. Just keep going. It can very much feel like being coaxed out of the womb, but in terms of the conditioning of nurturing, that it can either be thinking that we need to indulge others, or that we need to constantly meet their needs, or these external ways of fulfilling somebody. But the best gift you can give anybody, and that you can give themselves, from my point of view, is that feeling of security coming from the inside out. And I was blessed to have a father, somebody in male form, who in my point of view embodied this universal mother archetype, moon and Pisces in the 4th house, pure moods, just a beautiful expression of what a natural mother is, at least from how I experienced it, that there was that ability to be vulnerable, coming from a male form, really you could see the evolution being able to integrate both the male and the female, and very self-secure from within, being able to really tune in to any given person's emotional needs, and to be able to give to that in a way to have the person feel very heard. So Soul is speaking of, and also Helena, that their emotional needs were truly met by that interfacement, or that connection of helping the other person via the 10th house polarity. How do you take care of those needs? How can you mature? And being able to nurture in these really sweet ways, whether it was through music, whether it was through nature, but truly being somebody who expressed, who knew how to access this universal mother from within. Um, and so looking at the natural expression of this coming through the moon in Cancer, then it's those that are shifting into this daily, because the moon is the bridge between the past and the future as we experience it in the nature of the moment. So often when we're meeting with that, the tension between past and future, automatically the dynamic of emotional security comes up. Because progressively what happens is that, as you were all speaking of, the external securities at some point do need to be removed in order for evolution to happen. So the Cancer moon is left feeling quite vulnerable, quite alone, and searching for ways of comfort most often. And the best thing you can do, which is what I learned from a very early age, is how to nurture yourself from within, how to make your own little home, whether it's something as simple as spending time with a beloved pet instead of a person, or whether it's as simple as taking a walk in a favorite bed of flowers, whatever provides that sense of being at home, that does not require anybody else. And that can be a way of navigating, or a way of meeting that insecurity that naturally comes up. And in that way, the soul can access that universal mother archetype of not only nurturing oneself. It starts with nurturing oneself, and then extending that to others in such a way as to where they no longer attract those who are needy, or those who would provide a false sense of security by the other person always nurturing them. And so I've experienced that, and also the opposite, that at other times when the Cancer moon person wants to grow and things have been too cushy, and they're vocalizing, I need to take the next steps here, I'm feeling smothered, or I'm feeling like I can't grow emotionally, and what do I do? And or they just start doing it and the other becomes very insecure. Oh my gosh, I don't have the same position, I can't exercise the same amount of emotional manipulation over you that I did. What do I do? And so the Cancer moon is going, okay, here I go. I'm at home in myself, and I can navigate the spaces to where the emotional nurturing is truly coming from connection to something higher, something larger. It's coming from the inside out. Being able to access those emotional waters to where they can give, that's a Libra, but where they can nurture without the other person becoming dependent, or vice versa. So it's really navigating that space between past and future in such a way to where you work with that emotional security shifting from the inside, from the outside to the inside. And as you were mentioning, both Kristin and Stacie, being very tender and being very gentle with yourself during those times of transition, because they can be quite intense. And something I've found that helps me quite a great deal having moon in Cancer is always reminding myself, where is home anyway? Is home here? Is home there? Where is it that I'm going to feel secure? And when I bring myself back to that and I try to remind myself, or I try to regain my strength, and that ultimately home comes from within, I can regroup, I can regain. I'm feeling more like I'm gaining rather than losing. Because when those emotional attachments pop off, all of a sudden you find yourself just blossoming like a little flower, full of emotional nurturing, full of being able to give, full of all those things that sweet, tender Cancer really wants to do. Most of the time. So it's nurturing that part that can do that in a way to where it's balanced, seeing the polarity to Libra, to where again there's mutual give and take, to where one or the other don't become emotionally dependent. And a wonderful example again is also, well, can't help but think of my papa. And how in childhood he got those hard knocks at times. He had moon square the nodal axis, Pisces in the 4th house, but ultimately his home was with the source, was with Creator. And he was able to take those types of early childhood experiences as reminders, or as like with a Pisces moon, culmination, that these were a relive in order for them never to happen again. So he took them as ways to to continue to evolve along the path of re-embracing his emotional body. That also happened through the children, and being able to both nurture through these really sweet. Stacie, I loved what you were sharing. A lot of the times through music and through nature, that there was those two dynamics that really so much individuality and so much bonding happened just through sharing these absolutely pure emotional states. Nothing held back, everything revealed, absolutely vulnerable in the most pure way. And it's such a sweet thing to share. And to me, that's one of the highest forms of that moon in the 4th house. Pisces square the nodes, see how he's recovering that skip step, it happening through the children, happening in the early life, happening through the family life. And final thoughts on the moon in Cancer before we shift to sun in Cancer is the great master Lahiri Mahashaya. He also had moon in Cancer in the 7th house. And from my understanding, one of the big teachings that came from him in his life was how to live in a state of emotional balance. That so often we hear people say, I can't balance my worldly responsibilities with my spiritual responsibilities. It's either going to be one or the other. I can't balance having responsibilities at home life or work life. And looking at that Cancer moon in the 7th, he became an absolute embodiment of how to balance both in a very nurturing, respecting the needs of the family, but at the same time, or his earthly responsibilities. But primary, of course, is always commitment to source number one, right? Home. But the Cancer moon in the 7th, being able to honor and balance both. So he's, from my point of view, an example of an evolved expression of a Cancer moon. I'm glad I got paired with the sun, because the sun, while the moon is that day-to-day, the egocentric structure, now we're looking at the big purpose. Now we're looking at the sun. We're looking at how everything's integrated, creatively actualized. It can often be things that allow us to shine. Seeing that it's the sun, or it's the larger purpose, while the moon was the day-to-day integration. And when you have sun in Cancer, all of those dynamics are being given a bigger, it's being integrated through life purpose, creative actualization, while it's the larger purpose in life and how everything's coming together. And a great example of that is Princess Diana, who had sun in Cancer, and her connection to her family, and through a universal family, that was her larger purpose. It wasn't the moon, it was the sun. It was how she shone. It was how everything was being integrated in that life, and how ultimately everything being integrated through her family, through her children. And one of her hallmarks was closely connecting with those who were ill, like with people with AIDS who nobody would touch. She gave them a warm, loving, tender embrace. I can't think of a better expression of a sun in Cancer.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Deva. That was excellent. Oh, loved it. I love Cancer. It feels so good. Yeah, I really I'm happy that you shared an evolved version of the moon in Cancer, Lahiri. That was really it's wonderful to see examples of how these different archetypes are expressed at the different stages of evolution. So thank you for that. What about you, Stacie? Any thoughts on her segment there?
Yeah, definitely, Deva, when you were talking about just the interface.
Oops.
The interface between the past and the future, because you know the past we tend to have security simply because it's a known quantity, and in the future it's not known, and so it tends to sort of bring up the insecure feelings. But when you really develop that inner security from within, you know, inside yourself, and when you're nurtured to do that by others, you can find yourself in any situation knowing that, you know, God created me this way. I have the capacities I have. You know, how can I help? How can I, what role do I have to play in this? And there's just a general security that allows you to really actualize yourself, your creative life purpose, sun.
Oh, excellent synthesis with the sun moon. That's exactly what I was trying to convey. So thanks so much for receiving that and playing that back in the way that you did.
Yeah, also a natural expression, we're talking about natural astrology, is just how you were parented by your father, you know, having that maternal touch, that ability to be both for you. And that was just obviously an ideal example as well. Because as I said early on, you know, it's about accessing both sides of gender and integrating both sides of gender. And of course, he is very much that for you, has been that for you. So, all right, we are going to move to actually a segment with Ari Moshe. He's just filmed us a 10 short video of his planets, Jupiter in Cancer and Uranus in Cancer. So let's check this out. Oh.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to look at Jupiter in the 4th house, or Cancer. Wherever we have Jupiter, it's really about sincerity and authenticity. The journey itself, what we learn, our spiritual growth, what we find along the journey is only possible if we walk the path without too many preconceived ideas about what's true. If we're on the journey and we hold a notion in our mind that we're supposed to find a certain kind of thing, and where we're going to find it and how it's going to look, we really never allow ourselves to be humbled and to learn and to discover along the way. So with Jupiter anywhere, there's this very important quality of sincerity to the path, really being content with the journey and really arriving there as we go. So when we place this archetype in the 4th house, or Cancer, it's really about emotional sincerity, emotional honesty, emotional authenticity. The journey itself, the learning, the expansion, the growth, it's all happening through the emotional body, through the realm of family. And so our ability to understand more about who we are and our place in life, it happens by really allowing the entire experience of home and intimacy and vulnerability, the realm of human tenderness. You know, in Cancer, we really access this place where we all need to feel like we belong. In Cancer, feeling at home means we feel safe to be where we are. And so in Jupiter, there's basically this attitude of optimism. This is all a part of the journey. And the challenge with Jupiter anywhere really is, in light of having any kind of preconceived idea of what things are supposed to look like, there can be a tendency to either underappreciate the journey or generalize things and be dismissive. So being emotionally dismissive and not actually being present for the path. This can actually look for Jupiter and Cancer in the 4th house as leaving family. Well, there's a better journey over there, someplace else, somewhere else. I don't actually want to be here. This is not where my path is. And there can be this trauma quality in Jupiter, actually, of feeling that I can't be myself here. The psychology of alienation can reflect emotional alienation. I can't be at home here. I can't be loved and cared for here. A lot of souls of Jupiter and Cancer in the 4th house will really have this karmic piece around learning to be true to their emotional experience where they are. That means being sincere. That means really being authentic. And what's learned, what's realized is, oh, I belong. It's safe here. Cancer requires safety. And so in cultivating this mentality of safety, it's like this very optimistic perspective that everything is allowed here. Everything is included here. And so then the journey doesn't have to go anywhere else. There's no need to escape or run away or find some other path or find some other experience. The entire realm of the human experience can be held in inclusion, which means Jupiter and Cancer is really expanding the idea of family to say family is a great and generous and expansive experience. There's a lot of rest. There's a lot of touch. There's a lot of nurturing, a lot of food, a lot of care, a lot of intimacy. Because really it speaks to this is where the learning is. This is where all the richness is. And spiritually speaking, to put Jupiter and Cancer in the 4th house, it's really ultimately saying, and it reminds me of this Mary Baker Eddy quote, which it goes something like, it has been and always will be the nature of divine will to manifest itself in the crevices of every human need. And that Jupiter optimism can be that you're going on a journey, you're on a path somewhere, and with the right attitude, there's a sense of anything can work out. Anything can happen. So, right now I'm traveling, as I'm making this audio, I'm traveling with my family in my van, actually sitting outside of Kristin Fontana's home and literally traveling Jupiter on the road home, with your family. And it's interesting because we can look at Jupiter in the 4th or Cancer in two ways. One is home is literally a traveling experience. You're traveling with your family. Or home itself is the journey. Like even if you're in one place, the need for Jupiter in Cancer or the 4th house is for it not to become the stagnant, fixed experience. There's no pilgrimage there. If you're on this journey, it has to feel very fresh and spontaneous. Because the essence of the learning and the growth and the expansion that happens with Jupiter is being true to the journey and really letting ourselves learn along the way. And so there is very much this resonance with what is naturally occurring. Natural home, natural family, natural emotions, being uncontrived, being sincere, unforced about it. And with Jupiter in the 4th house, simply creating that kind of family, creating that kind of life, and this is something that I'm learning big time, it just takes really being honest. Otherwise, the pessimism with Jupiter, Jupiter exaggerates wherever it is. So it can very much be this mentality of, I can't be home, or I, don't like this, or I can't rest here, I can't be myself here. And the work really is cultivating a clear mindset. The principle of home, Jupiter is a principle. So we take the principle and we apply it in our life. Here, it's the principle of we are safe, we are home. And to actually apply that as a spiritual practice. Now Uranus. Uranus corresponds to our essential individuality. It's who we are according to our soul essence, not necessarily our personal memories, our identity constructs, or who we think we are, or who our friends are, etc. All of those things are very conditioned. And when we look at Uranus in general, we're looking at the unconditioned. We're looking at that which is not a thought projection. And so it can't be identified within form. When we place Uranus in Cancer or in the 4th house, we're looking at liberating from our identity construct, which means all familial associations, that which is emotionally secure, that which constitutes for us a sense of home and belonging. It's like, what's home and belonging? This is where these people or these places, these connections, these associations, these memories are what make me feel safe. And thus these memories are what make me not feel safe. We could have with Uranus in Cancer or the 4th house, the situation of emotional fracturing, where due to trauma, and Uranus always corresponds to where we often interface, and we're not necessarily conscious of this, meaning this is not a conscious memory. We carry memory of this in our individuated unconscious, where we interface with experiences where who we are essentially is not accepted. So we can have the excommunication or the cast out, Uranus in the 4th. You are not welcome here. And we understand that Uranus really corresponds to where people gather according to natural affinities. And we then form an association with, this is who I am, this is where I belong. We can also have the trauma linked to not necessarily being kicked out or excluded, but losing, your family's wiped out, your village, your tribe, that which was home, no longer being there. And so Cancer depends on sensing, okay, here's security. I can depend on this to be myself and not carry any vigilance. So the challenge with Uranus in Cancer, the 4th house, can be this state where the mind is hyperactive, the nervous system is very excited, in not feeling that it actually belong, or that its associations with home and belonging create a persistent experience of coming across the same trauma over and over and over again. And so what happens in the emotional fracturing is certain triggers will manifest. And these triggers will bring up the sense of unsafe, either unsafe, unsupported, not at home, or just sort of dissociating. I don't want to contend. I'm going to, Uranus, disconnect from home, disconnect from family. And the triggers may not make any sense, meaning we may not understand why we're feeling what we're feeling according to the triggers that are manifesting. Because what happens when we are traumatized and we are emotionally fractured, we literally take these parts of ourselves and we put them to the side. And as we awaken our own condition and the things that bring up that which we've dissociated from will sort of, in a seemingly incongruent way, bring us to face and feel or remember things, and it may not seem to have any context, or we might feel incredibly unsafe where rationally there's no reason to. And so one of the practices with Uranus and Cancer, the 4th, is that of observer. This is observing your emotions. Otherwise we create a story, and the story that we have resonates with whatever is unresolved within our own field. And so we recreate this trauma. In becoming an observer, we ultimately disconnect ourselves in a healthy way from the emotions as implying who we are, meaning our identity is not defined by what we are feeling. And this creates a whole experience of home and belonging and puts it in a place where there's no context for it. We all have these familial associations that basically say, this is where home is, this is where I feel safe. As we wake up, we realize all of these associations are just conditions, they're memories that we're carrying that have imprinted ourselves emotionally. Naturally, we always find with Uranus that we associate with groups of people, and this can be for better or for worse, where we feel like there's no group, or there's no belonging, or we find resonance with people that share a similar way of being with us. For many souls, this impulse towards liberation is going to manifest as, okay, the traditional way of doing family and home is stifling to my individuality. So there's a movement to come into a way of being that is more intelligent, that supports a greater sense of nourishment and thriving and caring, 4th house, for all of us. So the idea of any conditioned constructs of family and home, such as a nuclear family, or any construct that any culture has ever had around home and family, it's all just that. It's all just a construct. So for many souls, there's a natural evolutionary process of associating with other people, where family and home is community, is village, is sharing in that. Now, the second this becomes, because the impulse for the conditioned mind is to want to say, okay, this is home, this is belonging, this is it. This way, it's now we're making into an unconditioned, naturally emerging process. We're making it Saturn. And so the process of liberation here, or the reality of liberation, is coming into a place of all of my familial associations are only held together in my mind. We learn with Uranus that there are no contradictory thoughts in creation, that everything, in a sense, is an expression of the thought of God, a manifestation of that. And the intelligence of Creator isn't in contradiction with itself. And so family, friends, community, home, all of that comes with who we are. We don't have to find it. We don't have to do something to create it or maintain it or hold on to it or even create a whole bunch of rules to make it organized. Although for many souls, the Uranus energy will express in that way, and that will be an improvement, so to speak, of what has been known before. But in essence, it doesn't require any control because Uranus is our natural state. And so the home and the associations that naturally emerge in our life are an extension of that.
Okay, we do not have Ari here to discuss his segment. That Uranus in Cancer was perfect. Just gets cut off by the cries of the babe. Yeah. Okay, so anything you want to share before we introduce our final speaker?
Yeah, when Ari was speaking about emotional fracturing relative to Uranus and Cancer, it's kind of ironic that he's talking about both Jupiter and Uranus, because in these moments of emotional fracturing, the traumas that can lead to, or that sort of induce them, it always comes back to the fundamental issue of interpretation, how we interpret an event. And through the archetype of Aquarius, Uranus, we can then step back and objectify all of the factors and to just see things at a distance. They say hindsight is 20/20. And then the other thing, and I think of like the Native Americans, for example, earth fracturing, they lost a culture. This was their home. Well, at least, here in the USA, this was, especially where I live, this was their home, and they were pushed off of their land, and they were given a teeny tiny little place, and unable to really allow their culture to thrive. And so that, that really creates an emotional fracturing within the people. And so I don't know, those aren't really neat and clean, but it's just.
No, I liked it. It was very relevant. And, Uranus in Cancer is such a tribe signature, or my friends or my family, it's this extended family energy. And you think about the Native Americans, and everybody was raising their kids, right? The whole tribe. So yeah, that's the natural expression of how to nurture through the tribe, through extension, through your friends, through your aunts and uncles, through your cousins. If you have that, people would really love those extended lines of nurturing. All right, thank you, Stace. And we are going to have Tara all joining us for our finale again.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be back, and I will first share that I have 4 planets in Cancer, 1 on the IC, the other 3 are in the 4th house, and the ruler of my chart is Mars, and it's conjunct the moon. So I guess I had an intention to do some Cancer work, moon work in this lifetime. So I, in my usual fashion of notes, there's some things about Cancer I wanted to share. Everyone, I actually like going last. At first I thought, oh no, I'll have nothing left to say. But it's like it gives me all this time just to let it all soak in, which is really awesome. Here's the thing about Cancer, and I think everyone touched on this a little bit, but it's always personal with Cancer. Like, it is the most personal story that we have, which is not a problem if we're conscious enough to realize it. The issues with Cancer all come from not recognizing that it is a story, right? That it's a story that's emotionally embedded so deep that we no longer even know what the facts were, if we ever knew what they were to begin with. If you recognize it's a story, it's not so much of a problem. If you attach to the story, it makes for a really difficult problem in your life and for people around you. The moon rules common people. Sometimes I like to say that Cancer, I mean, and I don't know, I mean, I'm like soul. I love all the archetypes too. And I think as I work with each one, I shift into thinking how much it's my favorite. But I do love Cancer. One reason why I love Cancer and the moon is that it is about the common people. It's not special. It's not something fancy. It's the everyday stuff that we're doing. And Deva mentioned day-to-day integration as well. So I think of Cancer as being the most human sign. And what I mean by that is it is so present to the vulnerability of humanity, the phases of life, all the way from, you know, birth all the way to death, including the times that we're ill, including the times that we are having emotional struggles, mental struggles. Cancer, when it is healthy within itself, can be present to people going through their humanity in its most fragile moments. That's huge. Someone mentioned earlier, I don't remember who, I think maybe it was Soul, about not pushing too hard. And then someone else talked about some Capricorn stuff, the polarity coming in. But Cancer as its own archetype isn't about trying to get something. It is evolving, but it's not about trying to change or fix the situation. It's about being present to the situation and honoring the feelings in the situation. And with Cancer, we know that from the EA perspective, it's forming the self-identity, but I want to take that a little step further. I always think about Cancer as feeling yourself into being. And so part of what the Cancer archetype is, we're literally defining our edges, like in the human container that we are in this lifetime. And external boundaries in themselves aren't even necessary if you have defined yourself from the inside out. Cancer is really about that. Like, I mean that. So it's almost like Capricorn lends its help, not for you to build big bridges around yourself, but for you to define yourself so well that people know they can feel it without even getting close where those edges are. And when you do this process of self-definition, also, like, you end up in the right spots in life. You end up where you're meant to be. It might have been an astrologer, Nunu Michaels, who would talk about, if you don't have your edges defined, you get put into all, like, the world tries to shove you into different places and puzzles, and like, it doesn't really fit. So you end up taking jobs or having relationships or saying yes to things and doing things where it's just not quite a good fit. And that's no fault and no good and no bad and all those things, you know, out the window. It's just, until you define you, nobody else, including you, knows where to put you. And so Cancer is so much of that. So I can't, and it's been such a process of my growth too. I'm in my mid 40s now, and I feel like maybe for the first time, I'm actually starting to mature some of my Cancer energy. So, you know, it's Cancer in fourth house also is not, it comes with age. You know, the fourth house in general is linked with that sometimes. And just the idea of it's over time, we get that maturity. So here's the other thing. It's the fourth sign. And 4 is a number of stability, like stable table, 4 legs of a table. Mm-hmm. So I always think about that with 4 and with Cancer, is that it's that stability. And again, it's an inside job with Cancer, inside, you know, from the inside out. The animal medicine I like to work with this is the great blue heron, because the great blue heron, it is very solitary for one, but it anchors itself through the water into the earth. And I think of that as us as human beings, when we are rooted in ourselves through the bedrock, then all the water life can happen, right? The emotions can flow, life can happen, but we have an anchor point. In the chart, the fourth house, or the IC, that is the anchor. It's the ballast that holds us there. If that's not strong, I can promise that anything else you're trying to do, any other part of the chart, it's not going to, at best, it won't reach full fruition, you know, but at its worst, you get pushed back on yourself over and over again because you haven't developed the stability at the root. Cancer also is famous for looking for the environment. Like, if the environment's okay, I'll be okay. The moon is like an okay detector, right? Like, am I okay now? Am I okay now? How about now? What about when this happens? So if we always go around with life expecting the external environment, okay, now I can be me, when the external environment makes us feel like we're at home, we don't really get anywhere. So that okay has to happen from the inside too. Let me see, what else do I have here? Yes, and Soul, I loved all the part on sex, because I had actually written down in my notes, and this comes from personal experience, in sex and love, Cancer just needs time to open up. Like, it needs to feel safe and it needs a little bit of time. Then it's one of the most responsive signs, one of the most responsive lovers. But that just doesn't come, again, with someone pushing. And the oxytocin part was brilliant, genius. I made a note so I can include that in my my future Cancer discussions. Okay, then here's the thing. We talked about mother and baby a lot, but for me, I've come to feel like all Cancers were in training to be good grandmothers. Like, it just has that feeling to me. And whether or not you have your own children is not the point. It's about being a wise grandmother, the kind of person that young people want to come and visit, because not just because it's comfortable, but because there's wisdom in that type of grandmother energy. And of course, in Native American tradition, grandmother is moon, grandmother moon is moon, right? That's that energy. And that resonates with me very much. And here's the thing with that grandmother, it's like this safe space where you can just be you. All strong Cancer, any signature, wants a place where they belong. That's not always going to look the same, right? Link that with Sagittarius, and that place of belonging is going to be really different than just a Taurus. But there's a place to belong, and that place of belonging needs to always be there. What I mean is, like, you got to be able to show up as you are with your warts and everything, and it to be okay for you there. Cancer needs that level of security. To be able to be vulnerable, to show your immaturity, to show your neediness, and to have it still be okay. It doesn't mean a stamp of approval that maybe you need to step up and look at those things, but I mean there's space for you just to show up that way. All right, so I have Mercury and I have Saturn. Starting with Mercury, so much for me is how we perceive life. It's about our perception. It's the window through which we look at everything and how we make sense of things. So Mercury in Cancer is a very emotional mind. It's looking at things through an emotional lens. And this can feel like life is happening at you or to you, because Cancer very much is looking at life as how it's making me feel. You know, we already talked about how subjective it is, but especially with Mercury, with the way you're making sense of things, you know, it's again, Cancer being that most personal story or narrative, that's how you're seeing things. So everything around you or life around you is somehow playing a part of your personal story. But we all know that it's not always that personal, right? There's other things going on around us. So that can be something to be aware of with Mercury in Cancer. There also is a growth opportunity here to learn to separate thoughts and feelings, because when you merge Mercury with Cancer, it's hard sometimes to separate the actual thinking with the actual feeling. And so they just bleed all into each other, you know? So what you think is maybe what you feel is maybe what you think. And for someone trying to have a conversation with you, by the way, that's confusing, because, you know, are we actually talking about something that happened, or are you having a feeling? And literally, if you have Mercury in Cancer like me, you might not know. It's here. You know, it's real right now. And being super sensitive to language. My partner is a Sagittarius. I love him dearly. And he has a Pisces moon, so he's very sweet, and a Cancer rising. But that Sagittarius sometimes, my Cancer, I mean, it is just like, it's rough and it's harsh and it's blunt, you know? And oftentimes he's even just being funny. You know, or he's just like, it's nothing intentional, but the Cancer, Mercury in Cancer is so programmed hypersensitive, right? To not the words themselves, one, and also what's underneath the words. So sometimes with Cancer, you know, we just need to grow up a little bit. We need to go sometimes we need room to be sensitive and emotional, but also sometimes having a little bit of thicker skin is good, because it's not always about us. All right, so some gifts of Mercury in Cancer. Language of psychology. People with Mercury in Cancer, whether they're trained in it or not, tend to think in a psychological way. Sometimes, though, having a conversation with them can always be therapy. So, you know, that can be like a positive thing. And sometimes it can be a consuming thing, meaning too much trying to process the feelings, too much getting into the psychological depth. Of course, you can imagine this goes even deeper with Scorpio, but we're talking about Cancer here. And also, just like Mercury to me is like the nervous system, how we're wired. So everything with Mercury and Cancer is just emotionally charged. And so if this is you or someone in your life, just to be aware of that and to not take it too personally either. Like it's very hard to control Cancer because reactivity happens like in a split second. And unless you're really conscious and on top of it and aware that, oh my gosh, I'm reacting, right? It's you're kind of down the rabbit hole and already in the personal narrative, and it's just hard to get yourself out. Okay. All right, I know I'm running out of time. I don't want to leave Saturn out. Saturn in Cancer or the 4th house can vary. So there's a number. One, it's a safety signature for sure. It can be a double down safety signature. And so some of the gifts here, again, because we're with Cancer, there still is a natural inclination towards psychology. So these people can be a guide or support people through their own emotional discovery and their own emotional process. There can be wisdom around that. Being able to hold their own space as other people are going through their emotional experiences, which by the way is a big gift, because most of us, when someone's going through emotional things, especially pain, what we want, number one, we get uncomfortable, and then we want to make it better for them. And part of that is good-heartedness, wanting to help them. But part of that is just that we're uncomfortable. So healthy Cancer is able to sit with uncomfortable and let the processing or the expression happen as it needs to happen. And Saturn can hold a container, right? So here's one of the positive things with Saturn with Cancer together is there's somewhat of a container to safely hold that experience. But wherever Saturn is, we need to strengthen, define, and own whatever the energy is. So with Cancer, this is strengthening the self-image, strengthening emotional self-sufficiency and emotional security. And it's also defining the self-image. So it's almost like a re-emphasis on, we already know that Cancer is forming the self-identity, but Saturn in the 4th house or Saturn in Cancer is even further emphasizing that to really put those, figure out what those edges are for you. And those edges can change over time. It's not like you just choose one day, this is me, and it never changes. We know Cancer is a changing sign, but to define the best that you can. This can also be defining family for yourself, right? What does that mean for you? What does family look like for you? Owning your own needs and neediness. This is a huge one, and it's been a huge one for me, to recognize what is really reasonable to ask of someone else, and if I really need that thing, to choose someone who can actually provide that thing, because Cancer oftentimes won't do that. They'll complain about not getting what they need, but we've actually chosen people or situations that literally don't have the capacity to meet those needs. And so we perpetuate, sometimes a codependency or dependencies or some of these different Cancer, more shadow, pathologies. And I guess also I want to say about Saturn and Cancer, it's a heart home builder, right? Saturn and Cancer is so good at building a heart home, not for itself, but for others as well. It can literally build that safe heart home for community, for anybody. And it can stay there. Like Saturn has staying power. So it's something that can truly last. And I'm going to stop there because I know I'm over time. So thank you for giving me a little extra wiggle room.
Thank you, Tara. One of the things that I remember reading about your bio, and we didn't do that today because we just kept repeating our bios with different people, but is you talked about your goal with clients, and it's honesty is one of the words that you used in that write-up. And I just feel your honesty with all your Cancer. I feel the maturity, I feel the evolution, and it's such a joy to witness because it is a tricky archetype. It's difficult. There's a lot of late blooming going on, right? This takes a bit. But I just thoroughly enjoyed that. And I don't know, Stace, if you have anything to ask her to offer in conjunction.
I really don't. I mean, that was incredible.
Yeah.
it really kind of made me think of, Mercury in Cancer, and how, individuals with this placement can really just be incredible at having the right emotional messages to deliver to other people who are in some kind of need. They know how to be gentle. And for me, for example, I mean, any education that I've had, I've had some college, but I only learned from the teachers who were emotional about what they taught. So it kind of reminded me of that.
Well, that's true for me too. I think any Cancer would say you got to feel it to trust it, and you got to feel it to even want to be around it. One thing I didn't say about Mercury and Cancer is it's healing words and healing hands, both.
Oh,
right.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow, definitely.
Yeah.
And we have Mercury transiting through Cancer right now as we're recording this. And one visual I want to give everybody is we talk so much about the water. It's the first sign, the first water sign that we get to, dip into the sea here, is to visualize the waves separating from the sea, and to remember that Cancer, of course, it's going to ebb and flow like the moon, and the moods will ebb and flow with it. But one of the teachings in evolutionary astrology, and this came from Sri Yukteswar, is to remember to stay centered in the sea versus the wave, so you're not subjected to all the cross currents of life. And the sea is source, it's the open door within you, calling you in, staying centered in the sea. All right, so thank you all. It was an awesome day. I loved it. Sue, do you have any questions for us before we bid adieu? And we do have a song from Ari at the end.
Yes, ma'am. I have a comment from Carol, who said that she has Sun, Moon, Venus, Mercury in Cancer, and says, just a small mention, Cancer came to nurture, love, protect, and heal.
Mm-hmm.
And
I liked all her chats.
And then let's see, we have a question for Sol. The natural Cancer loving emotions are represented by oxytocin. What about crying?
Oh, yeah, well, yes, that's also part of water, I don't know, it's part of the cleansing capacity of the body. So crying, well, it's the ocean coming through you. And it was something that I thought about when you were speaking, Tara. It was that it was about Mercury in Cancer and tears, not particularly just tears, but water in general, because it's memory. You've heard of this Japanese scientist who proposed that water can retain knowledge, like it remembers things. And for me, tears, I don't know if you particularly phrase this question as being part of the connective capacity, that oxytocin is a hormone that has to do with connection through our bodies. It's just this energetic connection in a way. But tears, well, it's more release. That's the water being released from the body. And I think it's so beautiful to think about this water being also containing some sweet memories, or sad and sweet memories. Very often when we cry out the river of the past. It's being released through our bodies. Mm-hmm. And after that, we're cleansed. And so yeah, tears are absolutely part of the Cancer capacity. I mean, whatever moves us is different from person to person. But in particular, I remember, I don't know if you guys saw Das Boot. It's Second World War movie.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, it's such a intense movie about some young men who are stuck in this boat. And as the South Node was crossing through Capricorn, I had I went deep into the Second World War and the First World War. And during this time I saw Das Boot. And I couldn't help but crying, it was this tears of, there were no, it was just water through my eyes, you know, like there was not, I wasn't like crying. It was just tears coming through my eyes, like throughout the movie. It was like I felt I cried out the pain of all these soldiers stuck on that boat. And I remembered something, you know, like, but like you become semi-aware of something, like there was a memory happening in that movie for me. And I recognized something, and that was just, I felt I cried out my entire connection to the Second World War there.
Wow.
I actually felt a lot better afterwards. Like, way more at peace.
I was saying, a good cry. This works, and with Mercury in Cancer right now, you talked about a memory. This can happen for all of us. And I was just taking a walk the other day, and some neighbors were on their bikes, this couple, and they said hello, and they wanted to know where the big guy was, which is my big English Mastiff who just passed away a couple months ago. And I was just enjoying this beautiful morning. It was really early, like 6:45 in the morning. And as soon as they said the big guy, I mean, this is not even a couple I've ever had a conversation with, but they knew the big guy. And I like literally went from fine to bawling in front of these almost strangers.
And I just cry.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I miss him. And, you know, it's just this, it was so cathartic at the same time. It felt so good to just be back in my emotional body, and all the circuits are just going. I think, you know, the water connects all the circuits. It just does. So.
Well, I really believe, you know, there's a connective capacity with water. And I had a very good experience just a couple of, I think it's a month ago or something. I started thinking about a friend from my school, my best friend from growing up. And there was this music playing on the radio. It was this Italian classical composer that she used to listen to a lot. Adagio, it's called, and she used to listen to it a lot when her grandmother died. And I thought, I gotta send this to her, you know. But then I thought maybe she'll be a little bit sad if I send it to her. But I did it, you know, like I just took a chance, and I did. And I hadn't spoken to her for a while, so I sent it to her. And then afterwards, I got this very, very wonderful mail back. She said, "Oh my God, Sol, finally I got to cry." And it turns out she was in the middle of a very, very deep personal, you know, a difficult personal situation, and she's been withholding for a long time. She hadn't been able to cry, right? So it only takes that little memory, you know, that little memory from the past, or just that right word, as you were mentioning, Tara, you know, like I think Mercury in Cancer, they just had lots of experiences where they just said something randomly, and then suddenly people are just being completely like, "Oh my God, I'm just crying right now because you reminded me of something." And you know, like it feels very random, but I think we actually tune into this. And I think you know, sometimes when I have clients with a lot of Cancer placements, it's always the solar plexus that's the big issue here, the belly, the stomach. We didn't even talk about the stomach for the Cancer archetype, which is incredibly important, because it's like, it's not clairvoyance, it's clairsentient. Like it's sort of like just feel into the environment. And I think that's why it takes so much time. I loved your point on the hypersensitivity, which is absolutely one of the things that a lot of Cancer people are struggling a little bit with, until that point when they become aware of it. Okay, so this is not mine. What am I feeling right here now? Like I feel like this big emotional sponge just picking up all kinds of stuff. Like, I don't think you cried for a while, you know, like, but it's beautiful. Yeah, crying is the release. So it's
all right, thank you. Everyone, I've cried rivers, makes me sadder and sadder, not relieved.
Yeah, well, that's another point, you know, it's a good point, you know, there's always, and that's where Capricorn comes in, you know, there's a time for everything. And I really love the point that Capricorn is tough love. It's like, at one point, you know, when you cry a lot, it's just exhausting.
Oh, that's true. I mean, it depends on what it is, for sure.
Yeah, like if it's necessary, okay, you know, like, but there has to be a time where you have to get up and start moving about a little bit, you know. And we always say that with Pluto, or at least in the circles that I move, is that, you know, Pluto, it's you know, like evolution has to happen at one point or the other. So you just have to figure out when to move on, you know, like it's that thing, you know, just
time limit. Time limit the tears.
Yeah.
When people go through intense Pluto transits and they get stuck in some pattern or something, it's always a very nice thing to advise them to just do something practical. Just do something practical, you know, like at one point, just, you know, like there was also, you know, with Uranus in Cancer, my ex-mother-in-law, she's not here anymore, unfortunately, because she had Uranus in Cancer on the South Node, and she was a special therapist for children. So she was an amazing resource for me to have when my children were small. And she said, there's this timing thing, you know, involved. You just have to know exactly when to take the child out of their emotions so that they can, the art of distraction, she called it, you know, there's like, but if you do this distraction, like you can't just say, oh, look, there's a bird, you know, and the child goes, oh, there's a bird. At that right moment, the child will say, oh, there's a bird. Oh my God, there's a bird here. You know, like something else will grab their attention. And I think that's the balance that I think is important for everybody who works with themselves, is to know when to do what.
Well, yeah, we could talk till eternity on Cancer. I have a feeling I just love it all, the vibe. But before we hear our final song, behind the scenes stars, we have Olive, Sue, and Linda Johnson. Thank you, Sue Hilliard and Olive, doing the Facebook Live monitor, and Linda Johnson. Oh my goodness, thank you guys.
Thank you.
And we are.
Do we have time for a couple of more questions, or?
Oh, you do? Well, I wanted to thank the group of wonderful volunteers that are also going to be putting this, or helping us put this into a book. There's a list is long. Thank you so much. Why don't we take one more question just for time's sake?
Okay, it was actually the first one that came in. Does the emotion of anger correlate to Mars or to the moon, or both?
Mars is anger.
But the moon is all emotion.
And the moon's, but Mars is, yeah. Mars, Aries, Mars first house, when that emotion's repressed, it becomes angry, you know, like the warrior. So yeah, anger as an archetype, anger is Mars, Aries first house. But the emotion through that cardinal square, right, in combination. So it would be the emotion of anger, right, Tara? So.
Well, and it could also be the emotion of anger. I mean, one of the purposes of Cancer is to understand our emotional dynamics. So when we experience that emotion of anger, we can then reflect on, okay, why am I feeling this way? You know, just to get perspective on ourselves. So it kind of works hand in hand, or it can work hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Also, I think, you know, just briefly mention, which I didn't have time for with Mars and Cancer, that there's often a lot of hurt underneath that anger. And I find myself to be most angry when I'm actually quite hurt.
Mm-hmm. It's all part of that cardinal square, though, right? The Aries to the Cancer.
Well,
right?
And I think it's important that we remember that emotions are like feelings that our mind is meddled with, right? So it's like feelings and then stories added to it. And so like it's so true, like what we're emoting is not necessarily what we're feeling. And that's another thing that makes, you know, the moon in Cancer a topic that could go on forever. Yeah. But emotion is not emotion is not pure, if that makes sense. Like, you know, it's what I mean by that is that it's tied to stories.
Mm-hmm. It's like muddied waters, right?
Yeah.
Thank you all.
All right. What about, one more. What about Moon, Mercury, Uranus conjunction Cancer? Oh, well, that would be a whole.
The song that I'm going to share.
We should go to this.
The energy
comes Ari,
is really very resonant with Jupiter, Sagittarius combined with Cancer in the 4th house. But the essence of Cancer really is when we're at home, there's an energetic sense of belonging. There's a feeling that we can be ourselves here. We don't have to be vigilant. So in a healthy state of home, there's a sense of restfulness and relaxation. And so that's why I choose this song, because it really speaks to the inherent right within all of us to find that space, to pursue home completely, to find a place of home within ourselves, to pursue home guiltlessly, to know our own belonging, to know our freedom.
Thank you all. What a team today. And Soul, you know, you're the troopers. I think it's 1:15 in the morning where you are. So Soul.
It's summer vacation, so my
all right, join us again. Yes, Natural Astrology Leo panel discussion on August 15th. Can you hear that lion roar? We're going to have some wonderful sharing going on that day as well, and I look forward to that. Until next time, namaste.
Namaste.
Bye-bye.